And so these kids who are already depressed and anxious and need this interaction at school, need the competition of school, need the socialization of school, they yank that out from under them and leave them isolated and at home for 2 years. And what do they say? They say, well, we did the best we could with what we had. No, you didn't.
Mm-hmm.
No, you didn't.
Mm-hmm.
You knew what you were doing, and you knew they weren't at risk from that virus, but you had a new hammer and everything looked like a nail, and you shut it all down and left them out there twisting in the wind.
Shift for a second, because you mentioned you're not particularly political, but I've seen you host a bunch of different debates with all sorts of people, some people that I'm friends with and that I know, talking about race and some of the political issues of the day and gender and a whole bunch more. And I wonder, do you think that fundamentally that this is just about ideas that people either got right or wrong, or do you think fundamentally people are wired differently? When you see people that kind of accept facts for facts and reality as it is, versus someone else that sees something just purely from their own perspective. Do you think that's just like an idea confusion, or do you think it's people, we're all wired differently? Some of us run hot, some run cold, some, a whole series of things.
I think some people have been trained in critical thinking, and I think others want to be accepted. And I think that if you get into identity politics, I think a lot of people start with one idea and they say, I can support this idea, but then they don't realize that there's a whole agenda that this group supports. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, I agreed with this one thing, but now I find out that they're doing all of this other stuff. They have all these other points on their agenda, and now I've kind of signed on. And if I resist that, or I ask about it, I'm going to get targeted. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be calling my job, my church. They're going to assassinate my character on the internet. And I think a lot of people are saying, look, this is just trouble I don't want. And I think that makes it just easier not to push back. And, someone, not me, I've repeated this, but I'm not the first one that said it. I would rather have questions I can't answer than answers I can't question. Mm-hmm. And right now, that's where we are. We have answers that we can't question, or we're labeled racist or phobic or haters. And people are saying, look, I just want to live my life. But it's gotten to prove very expensive in terms of our culture, our society, our schools. And I think people have to find the resolve to say, I'm not going to be silent just so other people aren't upset. I got to be willing to push back.
Do you think any of the answers come from our institutions and from our systems, or do you think that's all just reverting back to, doing the family thing right and the community right and everything else? Like, to me, it's like we're not going to get any, real answers or any real retribution, let's say, on COVID. There's a whole bunch of things that the government clearly is lying to us about that I don't think will be resolved, that maybe, and that's why I would say it's more of a spiritual war. You just have to disconnect and figure out how to live your life the right way.
Well, I've been very much quoted as saying that I think some of our elite universities are doing nothing but creating intellectual rot. Mm-hmm. In our young people right now. They're not teaching critical thinking. For God's sakes, we've got universities that are sponsoring anti-Semitic groups on campus. I mean, at first they were saying they were pro-Palestinian. Now they're actually, they don't even go through that charade. They're now just saying they're pro-Hamas. Mm-hmm. And I saw deal the other day that said gays for Palestine. I tell you what, take that banner and walk into Gaza and see how that goes.
Gays for Palestine is a little different than Palestine for gays.
Yeah, you're not going to have a very nice walk through the Gaza Strip with that banner. They don't even teach them, look, they would kill you in a heartbeat. They would throw you off of a building over there. I had the son of one of the co-founders of Hamas on the show, and he said they would kill you before you got out of your car. And you're supporting these people, you're rallying these people. And a lot of what bothers me, and this is what I mean about culture not political, is how much our lives are impacted by the government, but not people we elected. I'm talking about bureaucrats that have too much power and too much control. We saw that happen with COVID. And let me tell you what I mean if you want me to.
Sure.
I'm talking too much.
Hey, you're being interviewed, man. Go for it.
Yeah. Well, all right, look, I said that we saw a spike in 08, 09, and 10 of the highest levels of depression, anxiety, and loneliness we've ever seen. All right, who keeps those records? Well, the Department of Education, the CDC, some of these agencies, not with elected heads, but with appointed heads. Okay, now, I point that out because they're the ones that do those measures. They're the ones that have those numbers and report the fact that our young people are really struggling mental health-wise. So we know they have that information. Those are the same people that when COVID hit, shut down the schools. All right, now, they shut down the schools, and at first they said, we're going to shut down the schools for a couple of weeks while we get our bearings. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it. You know, this is a new strain of something. They got to figure this out, so they'll take a couple of weeks and figure this out. Okay, then a couple of weeks turns into a couple of months, and then then it turns into a year. Then it turns into 18 months. Then it turns into 2 years. Now, who shut this down for 2 years? The same people that have the numbers that say our young people are in a mental health crisis with high levels of anxiety, depression, and loneliness. The same people that know they need to be engaged at school. The same people that know that half of our referrals for child abuse and molestation come from mandated reporters at school, and we're going to shut that down and abandon these kids and lock them up with their abusers at home. And sure enough, referrals dropped as much as 50% nationwide because mandated reporters didn't have their eyes on these kids anymore. And so these kids who are already depressed and anxious and need this interaction at school, need the competition of school, need the socialization of school, they yank that out from under them and leave them isolated and at home for 2 years. And what do they say? They say, well, we did the best we could with what we had. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You knew what you were doing, and you knew they weren't at risk from that virus, but you had a new hammer and everything looked like a nail, and you shut it all down and left them out there twisting in the wind. And that's what drives me crazy.
So tell me how we get out of it. How do we get out of that? I mean, you're basically describing the deep state, that there's this perpetual thing that has information on us that seemingly can lock us down. I'm afraid that they're going to do it again, that everyone right now, it's cool to be like, I wasn't really for it. But they'll come back and say, oh, it's 10 times as deadly, or it's something else altogether, and people will fall for all the same things again. So what's the inoculation there?
I'm just waiting for the next one to come around the corner. And, by the way, I didn't say this after the fact. I said this at the time. When this first started, I went on the air publicly multiple times and said that the damage that will happen psychologically, mentally, and emotionally will exceed the damage from the virus itself. And they all said I was a crazy man. I was a heretic. And when that all came true, how many of them you think said, hey, we want you to come on so we can apologize? Zero.
Yeah. Hey,
Zero.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop screaming, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.